In this episode, we're joined by Brett Copper, president and partner at Copper Storage Management. Brett grew up in the industry, but instead of being satisfied with an inherited self-storage playbook, he challenged it. His push to solve hiring inefficiencies turned into a full rethink of how facilities are staffed, operated, and valued. Today, Copper Storage Management manages hundreds of locations using a remote-first model that prioritizes efficiency, consistency, and customer experience. We'll unpack the realities of remote management, the pricing pressures facing operators today, the future of AI-driven discovery, and what small operators can do to compete in a consolidating market. Let's dive right in. Brett, welcome to the Self Storage Lab. I feel like it's been a long time coming. You made an appearance early on, but now you have your own episode.
It's been a long time.
Welcome. I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to geek out today. All the fun things in store. You've been all right?
Oh, been great. Married, as you guys know, so enjoying the married life. That's always fantastic. We did have the crazy once in 100 years ice storm in Nashville. And so we still got, I think, 10,000 homes without power. Ours was out for almost a week, which in 0 degrees is brutal. It did make me realize, I've told people, I think society is only about 2 weeks of no power for everyone before everything's
goes.
gone. I think it takes about 2 weeks and it's all over at that point.
Yeah, it's amazing the reliance on electricity, right? We don't even realize it day to day until you don't have it.
Or if you're lucky, you have gas at your house or home. That might be nice.
We did not for some reason.
Not a lot of people don't.
You also realize how without internet and things like Netflix, we're like very close to an existential crisis. Once you have to really just sit there without your phone and you're just sitting there in the dark and it's cold and you have nothing to do, you're real close to just, you're like, what are we even doing anymore? What is the point of this?
Yeah. Feel
Bust
for
out
all
the
those
puzzles, man.
with a little candle.
Yeah, the jigsaw puzzles with the headlamp.
I just cleaned it up, or else you'd have been able. I could show you on the floor, but we have a big puzzle board. My wife loves puzzles, and you would have seen a giant stack of candles all around it with a half-done puzzle that I had just put away. Trust me, we broke it out. I took the guitar off the wall. I hadn't played in probably 8 years. I was like, we're doing something other than me going crazy.
Some good came out of it, though. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you ever? We'll get to the fun part soon, but have you ever played with like the 3D puzzles?
No. My grandfather likes them a lot. He's a big fan, so I've seen him do them. Does like train engines and cars and stuff.
There's some crazy ones. I'll have to shoot you some links, see if your wife is into that too.
Sure.
But sweet, man. I'm really thankful and grateful for you joining us today. Really excited. Just to kind of start off, I feel like your name is pretty well known, by now in the industry. We can get into your history if you want to do that, but I guess I'll pose it a little bit different way. You've been around storage your whole life, my understanding, right? Mm-hmm. But when specific question there is like, when did it stop being your dad's or your family thing, and it started being a thing for you personally?
Yeah, it's a great question. First and foremost, I'd say forever I thought I would never do storage. I thought it was the most boring industry in the planet. I wanted to be in music. I wanted to, like race. That would be fantastic. Be a pilot. You think of all those things that sound really, really fun. And I remember being a teenager. I was probably 16, going to, during the summers, I'd go with my dad to do these big due diligence projects for big private equity that were buying big groups of facilities. And so I was traveling with him one week and we were at some big REIT. I can't remember what it was. And I basically have this whole list of, operationally for due diligence of all the things that weren't being done correctly at this facility. And I just had the question. I was like, how much is this worth? And I'd never really asked that before. Like, probably $7 million. And I'm like, well, here's a whole list of everything that's being done wrong or issues or whatever else. I was like, so if they fix this list, very easily fixable, how much would it be worth? Probably 9 or 10 million. And at that moment, I was like, well, maybe there is something to storage, but I'd kind of filed that away. In college, obviously did a lot more work, especially on the feasibility study side and comp research and all of that. But it really wasn't until I got sober and I realized that, maybe being a rock star or being, in the music business or being whatever, all these great dreams that you have, how practical is it really? Like, am I the top 1% of the 1% who's going to get lucky enough to do this? And I started to realize it's more fun when you're good at something. You enjoy it much more. I had worked plenty of jobs. I worked at all through storage, but I've also worked a lot of non-storage jobs. And you realize that if you're not enjoying it, it's not fun. You're not good at it. What's the point of this? And so I started working for the firm full time. The only bad part about it is I was traveling probably 230 days a year, which is terrible. Wouldn't recommend that part. But during that, I got a ton of experience and realized I really like this industry. I like the trade shows. I like meeting people. I developed really good relationships with most of the vendors out there. And then once I started speaking and getting some small gigs there, I'd say right around maybe 24, 25, I was like, oh, I really love this. And then, 2019 started the management company and ran that and, wanted to be kind of the first doing remote management. Once, that really helped because then it clicked for me that, well, I can make a legacy here that is different because I'm doing something in the space that really very few people are doing and no one had done it in the management side. And so once I had my own identity with that and people kind of associated me with it, then I think it even, became more of my thing where dad still has his great company, successful and loves it. And I don't know if he'll ever retire. But here was my thing I built that could really leave an impact. And so I think that helped a lot, but it was certainly a few steps at a time during the whole journey that got me closer and closer.
That's awesome. And, going back to your musical ambitions, I still see a couple albums and records behind your wall for those that are watching the video. Kendrick, I can't really see the other ones, but great album. So
Oh, yeah.
you're still in that game, it seems like.
Oh, I love music. There's no way around. I mean, for anybody that's, I guess part of my quote unquote brand too is everyone knows the tattoos because they're always out. But, basically probably 250 hours worth of ink on my arm that's all music related, top to bottom. And certainly Kendrick's on there, I'll say it. I'm a big Kanye fan. Okay. Take his stuff, his personal stuff aside. The dude makes great music.
Yeah.
But yeah, on that wall, I've also got, you got to pay homage to the Grateful Dead. So Jerry Garcia up there. And then big Eminem fan especially when I was younger, loved him. And so I got to have him up there. And I got a bunch of other stuff all over the house. But yeah, those are the ones behind me.
That's awesome. I think all of those have paved the way for a lot of the artists that we're seeing today. So that's a pretty good homage, I think.
That's right.
So, oh, that's awesome, man. And I know we always geek out about shoes. I know that's like your other secret.
How many times has he given me shit at a trade show that I
Love
need to
your
step
shoe
up
game. From the first time we met Mason to now, big improvement on the shoe game. I think at the next house, we get a bigger home office. I'll move my Yeezy collection from the closet. I'll have it on a wall, somewhere behind me. I'll have all that out. I do love some Yeezys. There's no question there. Those are, they make the best shoes. There's no question.
That's awesome. And you are a rock star, regardless if it's in music or in self-storage. Always got the groupies and everybody. You guys travel with a pretty big group every time at a trade show. I'm curious though, man, you talked about remote first. Like, when was that switch? Like, what was the thing that like went off in your head that you guys said, hey, we've got to go all in on this. This is the future. And we're going to, lead the industry here.
I was doing a lot of operational consulting on my own and going out with the firm and saying, all right, I'll come in, help you with your operations, hire a manager. We did a lot of emergency stuff where, very common thing in the industry. And I'm sure you guys with your product have heard it a lot. Traditional owner had the same manager for 10, 20 years. All of a sudden they left, retired, passed away, whatever it might be. And so then how the hell do we run a store without anybody there? And I had hired so many managers and I spent years getting in front of managers and doing seminars and explaining operations. And what clicked was I realized that unfortunately, for what a facility can afford to pay for a manager versus the quality of the person you can get for that price. And obviously there are plenty of exceptions. If your manager's listening to this podcast, they're probably a pretty good manager if they're getting involved. But the truth is 80-90% of storage managers out there could care less. They're really there to get a paycheck. And then, so I started to realize, well, then what are we really doing all day? You're training people. And then you start to look at time assessments and you realize that at a well-performing store, a full-time manager really only needs about half the time that they're there to do anything that's really worthwhile. Everything else is really minor, easy upkeep. So I thought, okay, well, the technology is getting better. Can I create a tech stack and go combine some products that'll make this possible? And so, once you guys had developed a product like what you do, with us being able to automate a lot of tenant interactions, once websites got better, more mobile efficient, QR codes were more widely accepted, I got very lucky that I started it right before COVID. Like 2019 was really the first time that we started doing this, and had no idea, obviously, how pertinent it was going to become. But when I looked around and realized, wait, there's Da Vinci locks of the world, there's easy rentals, contactless, there's good call centers. It really became pretty easy that, wait, I think we could design a set of operations that are easily adoptable, which you've seen now. There's probably 100 other companies that do what we do, and I have no problem with that. There's more than enough facilities in the country, but they're using that same model that was originally built, where it was, here's the easy, simple way to do it. I think that really that was the driving force. Is I just realized I hated hiring and training managers, that we were finding worse and worse people. And so I wanted to find a way to rectify that.
Yeah, it's awesome. You kind of saw the writing on the wall. Obviously, being a younger generation, you're used to having iPhones and your Androids. I think you're an Android user in your pocket, et cetera. But let's
Don't slander me on here. People hate that. They're going to come after me.
I'm curious, like, to dig into the kind of mental framework. Like, when you're looking at a facility and you're going, hey, there's a operational excellence that can take it from a $7 to $9 million facility, or you're talking to a new operator that's coming into the market. Like, what's that framework that you're thinking about around areas of opportunity, the tech stack that come in? Like, break it down into, like, kind of, where are these things within the organization happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. So obviously each facility is a little different, but if we wanted to hit kind of a generalized checklist, it's a few different things that are really your main ones that you can probably find a lot of facilities, especially mom and pop run, which is the vast majority of facilities out there. I mean, 75 to 80% is what's projected for mom and pop. You'll probably find a couple of these points. So one would be expenses. Are there areas that we can cut out? Because let's say a facility is already 93%. Let's say it's right on target. You're looking to buy it. Their rates are already as high as it can get in the market. And so, you're not going to see huge returns there. Well, look at their expenses, which is the first place I think remote really helps. You go down the line items and you see $60,000 a year for a manager. It's a lot of money that you could cut out. Looking at ancillary sales is a big piece. Are there things that they're not selling, upcharges like tenant insurance? Maybe it's admin fees, tech fees. Are they doing auctions correctly? We see that a lot, where I would come in and I realize the manager is just basically taking $20 here, $10 here on a unit, pay me 6 months from now, all that. But yet the manager gets paid the same time every month, whether those people pay or not. And for whatever reason, they don't have that same kind of feeling. So that's an easy area to kind of come in and change. The tech stack is extremely easy. You'll find it's getting a little bit better now, but for a long time when I would speak, I'd ask everybody to raise your hand if you don't have a website. Now, my dad infamously would do that and then call them an idiot and be like, I would fire you, while that I'm a little bit more in between, but it is getting less and less. But that's a huge piece. That's an easy way to add in value. If you notice that their occupancy is lower and their rates are lower and they don't have a website, there's a 90% chance that's directly related to the website in not having a good way to talk to tenants. As well, if they don't have a call center or a tool like Swivel, for example, that can deal with tenant interactions, that's a big issue. Right now, almost 80% of people rent from the first two facilities that they called. Well, that also applies to chatting online and reaching out. And so let's say for us, we have to staff a ridiculously big call center for the number of calls that we have. But when we can implement a product like this, where say 25% of our interactions, give or take in either direction every month, can be handled automatically day or night when someone needs it, well, then we know they're not going to go somewhere else because they couldn't get a hold of anybody. Well, that's an easy way to squeak out more rentals, is just from a contact standpoint. I think a combined effort between all those things, is probably what's most of the time, the biggest issue operationally that can be fixed. And I would say to viewers, especially if you're new to storage, if you're looking to buy a facility or you have some currently, the good news is operational problems and tech problems are the easiest to solve by a long shot. You can't fix a bad market. You hope you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in CapEx. That can break a deal. But if it's any of the issues we just named, very easily fixable to get the value up at a facility.
That's very true. And it's just crazy to me that, I remember you guys being one of the first ones early on whenever we got into the game, and it's just crazy the idea of remote unmanned, was so risky, and now you're seeing more and more happening. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, and you guys being on the field, day to day, are there still, I'd say, like misconceptions that you see operators still have about going remote, going unmanned?
Well, yeah, all the time. First and foremost, I think people. I remember I was asked at an SSA panel. Someone was like, "Well, how do do you really even manage the facility well operationally without someone there?" And in people's mind, they think when you take out the manager, you're also taking out a lot of features and customer service. And I think there are two ways to do remote. One's the right way, one's the wrong way. If you go down that kind of first path of thinking, like most people would maybe have a misconception about, you're completely right. It won't work. If you take away human interaction and you don't give people the option, if you don't provide good customer service when someone's needs it at the moment that they do within reason, 3 in the morning is a very different scenario. But in our case, we do 8 to 8 every single day, 7 days a week. So we actually give them more human interaction. The only difference is it's just not face to face. But if you call us, you're going to get a human being if you want to talk to one immediately, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's a big misconception. They also, a lot of times, assume that you lose renters converting a store and a large number of renters from a fully managed store to a remote store. We get that a lot. The truth is, with all the changes we do, adding tenant insurance, let's say if a store didn't have it, which again is optional, you always make that optional, going in and doing auctions at stores that haven't been done, taking the manager out of those stores, you really see the exact same regular transition turnover, whether you are keeping the manager there or not. At the end of the day, it's usually only a couple people out of 100 maximum, with all of the changes that are being made. And you're well making up for that with the operational efficiencies. And then you fill those spaces right back up. And I'd say about 70% of all the stores we've done about 300, just over 300 since 2019 with this model. Probably 70% were acquisitions where it had a manager, was being ran a different way, and you transitioned it over. I think to battle those misconceptions, we have to explain how we talk to tenants, how we communicate the changes. It's very similar. We're not going to go in and change all of that day one. Obviously, we're getting rid of the manager, can't do anything there, but we're not going to charge late fees in the first 30 days. We're not going to do auctions for typically the first 30 to 60 days. We call every tenant, we send welcome letters, we explain the changes, and then we also pump it full of a lot of positive information like, hey, let's say the owner is planning on redoing cameras in the gate or fixing paving or doors, and you're going to have, the ability to do business, whenever you want to do with the facility. You're able to talk to people when you want to talk to them. You don't have to worry about someone being away for lunch or not returning your calls. When you package that all together with the changes and you give them a fair timeline of when you're going to do these things, you get a much better response than what people would think. Most cases, tenants, as long as they still have access, they know where to pay their bill, they typically are pretty happy as long as you're providing good customer service. The last misconception I would say is on the Google reviews. That did not used to be a misconception. In fact, we had for a long time a council for remote management for other companies that were kind of coming in. We'd all weigh in. And for years, the biggest problem were reviews. And you guys know this very well. It was so hard to get a commitment for a 5-star review when you don't have a face-to-face interaction. Luckily, with the tech stack, with you guys building out a review solicitation, we also use a bird eye as an ancillary piece as well to manage the reviews. For us, we went from, let's say at 100 stores, 30 bad reviews a month, 30 good reviews. We couldn't figure out how to do it. This whole last year, we had an average score of either 4.8 or 4.85 stars at all remote facilities for an entire year. And we were getting like 500 or 600, reviews a month. So that used to be true, but now using good products like obviously Swivel and then implementing your sales team, having them incentivized to get reviews, you also get rid of that misconception. You can have very, very well performing facility without having to have someone there.
Touched on a couple of things, like we're removing human process in a couple of key touch points, but obviously we work really closely with y'all's team, and there are a lot of humans on the Copper team and the self-storage management side of things, the third-party management side. Like, how do you guys think about keeping that human touch through a user journey and an increasingly automated experience for self-storage customers?
A big thing for us was giving customers choice. Some customers, we find about half, give or take, depending on the market, never want to talk to anyone. They just want to go on, rent their unit either through the chatbot, through going on the website itself and doing a checkout process, scanning the QR code, whatever it might be. But we find about half just never want to talk to anybody. And it's usually age related. Millennials, Gen Z, a lot of them just don't need to talk to anybody because let's be real, probably the easiest product in the world to explain on a website or over the phone. It's 3 walls and a door. And that's really it at all facilities. But we find with the other half, not only do they want to talk to a human, they might want to talk to them in a different format. Maybe it is chatting with them where, they want a human. So immediately an agent takes a live agent takes over and they walk them through the process. Maybe they want to call in. We still give them the option to show units. We can open a gate. We have maps. We even try to go that far where we'll say, all right, on this aisle, here's a 10 by 10. We can show you a 10 by 15. And those are easy things we can do where all of a sudden you have a certain number of managers or operational specialists, whatever you want to call them, that can help tenants at, say, 10 stores a piece instead of having to have someone there for maybe 2 or 3 walk-ins a day. And so I think it's an interesting, question where you have to balance how can we meet them where they want to be met, except for one place, which is just the face-to-face meeting.
This is all like awesome information, Brett. I actually remember, was it you or I think you in Nashville? You guys had like a live battle between you guys and maybe Grace from
Oh, yeah.
Absolute. Yeah, that was fun to
Yeah.
watch. But, talking about just like remote and really using tools, automation in a way that makes sense, right? Like, you're kind of like building this supply chain and still keeping the human element, right? Where it's most important. But, if you're talking to somebody, you're going up in that debate stage again, really going against somebody that is gung-ho about the traditional model, right? Like, what would you say is really at stake for them over the next, 2 to 5 years if somebody doesn't evolve? And again, it doesn't have to be completely unmanned. I understand there's the hybrid approach. There's a model that fits for everyone, but what would you say is that really at stake if somebody actually doesn't get with what's going on today?
The biggest problem they run into is just efficiency and NOI. The valuation of the store is completely different. Your cash flow is completely different when you're trying to run these traditional old school. In those debates, I've done it with Grace. I've done it with Stacy a couple times. And that's the biggest argument is if our store occupancies in the same markets are the same, if our rental rates, let's say at the same store occupancies where it's comparable are the same, but yet our expenses are drastically different, then what's the point of adding those extra expenses? I think that's the biggest problem is making stores work in today's world with where interest rates are. It's difficult. I think it's going to get better. But when you're already competing with equity firms who only need to make 7 to 12% annual on these facilities and they can pay more than you, how do you find a facility that's going to be possible? Well, first, it's got to be smaller facilities because otherwise they're all buying the 500 unit plus facilities. You can't buy a 200 unit facility and it makes sense with a full-time manager. It almost never does anymore. So first, you're cutting yourself off, completely from buying well-performing assets and being successful. But then you're also not safeguarding yourself when you go to sell a facility and you can demonstrate that your NOI is doing much better, that it really is worth more money. We see that, I think, all the time. And it's allowed us, we've bought 60 stores since 2019. And we couldn't have bought probably half those stores if they, didn't have a remote model because they just wouldn't have penciled otherwise. So it's really opened up a huge element for us to expand and continue to do more deals. So I think those are really the main components that they're missing by not going, with that model.
What do you think? It's a pretty eloquent pitch, right? Like, hey, we can do more with less. The NOI goes up, value of the business is up. We've got the ability to go and purchase assets that are not, huge facilities. Like, where are they missing the story most of the time? Is it just them, holding on to what's worked for them in the past and not wanting to change? Or like, is it something else entirely?
A big problem, which you can actually point to the Extra Space problem. They're a great example of this. They paid $590 million for Storage Express. They bought just over 100 facilities. They bought his model. And a year into it, it wasn't working. And the big issue they found is, from at least what I understand, what I've been told, so I'll put that, caveat out there, that they tried to use their own established call center and their own established technology to run automated stores, but yet that system was designed for thousands of traditional stores. And you cannot run the stores with the same identical system. So, in a lot of cases, for especially bigger companies, it's like turning the Titanic. I mean, we had to really redesign even the call center side. We tried to use call centers for traditional storage and use them third party for us. And we found that the mistakes, how agents are used to talking on the phone and types of questions constantly, it's instinctual. Well, I'll send you to the manager, hey, yep, you're going to go on site to submit your cash payment, whatever it is. It was so hard to break that apart for these agents when they're answering for both. So there's a big apprehensiveness, and it's fair that if they try to use their existing system and they don't go all in or have a division of labor where you have some people assigned to one, some people assigned to, the general traditional facilities, you run into a lot of problems. So in their mind, I mean, it is somewhat fair for them to be afraid to do it unless they're going to invest and use products that are designed for remote management. It's very, very hard. And so it's almost like they've reached a point where, what do you tell leads? You say that, yeah, we think you need a personal feel. You really need them there, guerrilla marketing and all these things, when the statistics show you that none of that stuff matters, that it's really about the overall performance. But you have to say that. Like, I don't fault them for doing it. It's a sales pitch and you have to convince people. But I do not see a world where over the next 10 years, probably 5, most of these operators are doing a significant portion of stores remotely. I think there'll always be a piece for hybrid. If you're doing a 100,000 square foot facility downtown Nashville, why in the world wouldn't you use a Cube Smarter and Extra Space and have a full-time manager? That's what they're best at. But if you're doing, 500, 600 units, even then you can do a hybrid approach and meet in the middle. So we are trying to help other operators kind of get to that point and convince them that, look, within your management style, just do hybrid. Have somebody that's there 20 hours. You can wean your store off of it. You can operate there. You can still have a couple, 3 days a week that have office hours if you really want it. So more and more people are obviously heading there, but they're very afraid that they're going to fail at performing with those stores.
It's interesting. I want to take us a left turn. We'll probably come back to the remote and tech and stuff like that. But you mentioned interest rates already. I'm just curious, somebody who's been in the industry since they could probably walk and have been in the trade show floors, walking around and stuff like that. Pressures on operators today, like what's the biggest problem they're trying to solve? And does this mirror something that maybe the industry has seen in the past, or is it completely, new problems that we're dealing with in 2026?
It's a mix of both. I think the biggest issue that still no one seems to really be able to solve is the pricing problem right now. COVID really, exploded well above what the actual market worth was for not only facilities, but for the rental rates that we were charging at these facilities. There were markets where operators are doing 50% rate increases in the first 3 to 4 months, doing another 50% 6 months later, and their stores were 98% full. It was completely a bubble that was produced by COVID. There was no way to continue because interest rates were so low. Housing market exploded. People were moving, and we had more leads than you could ever dream of. Now we've run an issue where even though we're now back to normal kind of pre-COVID levels, all the pricing models and developments got so used to those higher rates and how those rate increases work that you're seeing a ton of operators struggle where they're either slashing rates down to almost nothing, say an $8 10 by 10 in a market to get occupancy back, or they're still trying to do aggressive rate increases and occupancy is really, really falling. You had even, the global occupancy in our business went from 93% as an entire industry down, I think as low in 2023 is like 81% is what was estimated. That is a gigantic swing to say stabilize stores. And if that number is that big, you had a ton of operators at 50, 60%. So I think that's probably the biggest problem is people trying to understand, well, how do we price these moving forward? The other one is search engine optimization and how all of us work online. The code that all of the marketers are trying to crack is how do we prime our website and our content and everything else for AI? Because you're starting to see this huge jump in using AI to search for businesses, for advice on stores. Where should I go? I use ChatGPT basically every single day for some small function at least, that it, involves work and some things personal that Google's not very good at. And so how if the criteria for the AI is constantly evolving every day, it's changing, the algorithms change. It's been a very kind of retroactive fix for these marketing companies trying to catch up and staying in a place where they're going to be picked up by these AI answers. So that's been a big issue that I think is difficult to solve. And obviously, it's very interesting. That's not my field. I know you guys know much more about it than I do, but we've had so many talks with these marketing companies that are just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, trying to figure out, well, how the hell does this work? How do we make it efficient? And how do we have stores that are going to perform well in this new era?
Yeah, I mean, I hear pricing being a problem. Just to put a nail on the head there too. I think it's a like an interesting one. And the thing that kind of stuck out to me in some of these conversations is just around the concept that like we don't have like a Zillow for self storage. So there's not this like historical like market rate that's clear and transparent for consumers, and a lot of the pricing mechanisms that operators, specifically the large REITs and extra space storage, are implementing today are kind of hidden. Right, you can go
Mhm.
scrape their website, and the value that is market is basically zero. It might not be zero, but it's basically zero. And then they're using ECRIs and some testing algorithm to get somebody up to what is actually a market rate, and so we don't really know what that is. So that's interesting. And I'm sure, Rodolfo, you could geek out about SEO. I mean, ChatGPT announced or is going to implement ads into the free version of the product, and so now we've got not only Google ad campaigns, but we're going to have generative campaigns that get into play, and even like browsers like Atlas. Like I'm in there the other day. I don't think I was searching for shoes, but since we talked about shoes earlier, like I was asking for feedback around something, and you're they actually have like a little swipe experience to you know try to understand what you're doing. It's going to be interesting how they pull in from operators around you to understand, is location important, is price important, is the amenities important, or are they just showing a map, very similar to Google Packs. That experience of shopping in ChatGPT or Claude changes basically every time. There's not a standard thing that operators can really prepare for. So it's just a really interesting time on, I think, both of those two topics. We could sit here and probably unpack for like the next like hour on each one of them. Rudolph, I don't know if you have any.
No, so have you been using Atlas? I actually still haven't used it. The idea and concept is interesting.
I've played around with it, and Brett, if you're not familiar, or listeners
No,
aren't
I'm not.
familiar, Atlas is ChatGPT's browser. They basically
Okay.
came out with a browser that you've got your Google search bar, quote unquote. It's just like your ChatGPT bar, and you can type in a URL, or you can start with a conversation, and then it'll open up URLs. And obviously, it's powering an entire browser experience on top of a ChatGPT. So it's interesting. I've used it for shopping because it directly will take me to, say, those e-commerce experiences from the experience. So that's been a really interesting use case. And, Rodolfo, we've had a lot of conversations recently about, from a business perspective, I've switched almost most of my workflow over into Claude recently. Like a lot of their models from a business perspective have just been like blowing my mind on what they do. And it's been really cool. I was showing Rodolfo earlier today that Claude actually opened up a Chrome browser and started commanding the Chrome browser for me to do research and pull out information around specific websites. And you can sit there. I know ChatGPT, 6 to 8 months ago launched, I think what they called Operator, which did something similar, but this was working in a lot higher performance way. And so it's just really interesting to see how those things impact. Really, what it comes down to is the attention layer of self storage, right? How do you manage SEO so when somebody's searching for it, or they're, how do you get that attention as the first layer, and then tools like Swivel come in to say, well, once you grab attention, how do you engage appropriately, get them through that shopping funnel? That attention layer is really changing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to your point, Brett, and like all these marketing companies and agencies and whatnot. This is affecting everything: contact center, interactions, communication, how your team learns, your website experience, right? When the website SEO, like long tail, what I would consider long tail conversational queries, like that's huge now, and how that affects how are you thinking about content and how are you putting content out? Like probably podcast is actually really, really good. We have transcripts out, right? And so it's just a shift in the playbook, right? Every playbook has an expiration date. You can't keep up with the Googles and all their, and, and all the new things that they continue to launch and switch up the algorithm on us. So just something to always keep in your kind of in your back of your head. And so kind of curious, because you said something about like, you've been earlier, you said something about, you guys have copper, you have the C3. Do you also run a consulting side of things as well? Like are you also helping, you're saying operators kind of think through how to potentially set this type of model up, et cetera. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, two sides. So obviously Self-Storage 101 does vast majority of storage consulting, feasibility studies, due diligence, operational, whatever it might be. And that's still full on running. We got more family members over there, but Dad and Bill both run that one. But yeah, the ones that we've done personally at CSM have really been for friend companies. We're very open to getting on, sharing how we do what we do. I don't consider the model proprietary. It's not like we developed our own software. We have any secret sauce to it. We've been very good at it because of the way it's been built, the people we've chosen, the structure of it. And so we've met with other groups to explain, and we've been very open on, yeah, here's where I think you're missing the mark on how you've built your structure for how the call center works. Well, you're running into issues here because it's going from here, A to B. You really should be going to C first. And then, okay, the scripts you're using might not be good, or hey, the tech stack you're using, it just doesn't work. There's too many, tenant issues or failure rates too high. So we've kind of helped a lot of our peers and been very open in helping them get their model better. And I think the better all of the people doing remote get, I think you'll see a better customer adoption rate on the storage facility ownership side. The more people doing it, the more people that aren't afraid anymore, trying to stick traditional. And then I also think from a tenant perspective, it always helps. The more facilities out there that tenants do business with without someone there, the wider that the public adoption gets. And the more that becomes, we're probably 10, 15 years away from when someone thinks of a storage facility, their immediate thought is that it is a self-service, that it's not, hey, I expect to see someone when I show up there. I really think that will change so much over the next 10 years that people will think of storage as not having someone there as a normal business model.
I want to let's take the 10-year timeline. Obviously the industry today is a long tail of, single to 3-4 location owners. I'm curious, like, do you think we're headed to a storage world dominated by, 5 to 10 mega operators, or, is that long tail going to be a characteristic of this vertical for, the foreseeable future?
I think here in America, everything by design eventually becomes conglomerates. That's just the way. When you have more equity firms making money in real estate, let's say, you look at the multifamily world and just rental property world in general, has become so stagnant and it's been such a problem, so competitive that they're looking for other avenues. Well, the same thing just happened to commercial real estate. After COVID, 25% of all commercial buildings sit empty right now, in the US. And so those companies have to go somewhere. It's a staggering thought. And apparently there's an even bigger issue where a lot of those loans come due in the next 24 months. And so you can imagine the shatter of the pricing of these buildings, which going to be great for storage, by the way, to convert. That is, if you asked me, secret sauce, I think that's the next avenue, is that investing and buying up these buildings to convert is by far the next thing. But when you add all that up and you already see equity firms kind of getting involved in storage, it used to be that no one really thought about it as a business model. Now, become so popular, we get calls day and night of people that are like, hey, I've been in this form of real estate. Everyone's talking about storage and we want to get in it. So I think inevitably it'll happen. But right now, when you look at the statistics, only 20-25% of the total facilities fall into that conglomerate, bigger equity firms, large operators, kind of a shell, REITs. And so that's such a big piece of the pie spread out in so many tertiary markets. And the vast majority of facilities are small facilities. It's really hard for equity firms to really make those worth, what they want. So I do think we have a much longer runway than some of these other industries might have had or might have currently. So eventually we'll get there. I don't think you'll see the majority of stores fall into that category. Definitely not in the next 10 years. It'll still be predominantly independent business.
Yeah, well, that's exciting for, entrepreneurs that, see this as an avenue to cash flowing other areas of their life or just, Rodolfo and I for years have talked about, the idea of owning duplexes just to have some type of a real estate asset class. And so I think as individuals wanting to be part of that game, it's exciting for us to think about that still being a potential for a long time. I think there's an interesting kind of caveat to a lot of this when people think about the long tail, because a lot of small operators, not all of them, obviously, and I don't know the exact percentages. You might have a better sense to this, Brett, than I do. But a lot of these small operators, although they're owned by the single individual or the family, are not managed by that person. They're actually using, say, third party managers like a Copper. One question there is like, do you know that percentage of
Yeah.
small
So the estimates of that 25 to 20% also includes third-party managed stores. A lot of people, it shocks people to know, if you really think about it, there are more storage facilities in the US than Starbucks and McDonald's combined.
I
Okay.
love
So
that fact.
combined, more storage facilities. And
Wow.
when you look at the management companies, including REITs, once you get out of, say, the top 10 management companies, I can't remember exact top of my head, the store count drops to like 50 facilities. And then almost immediately after it's drops to 20 facilities. So most of the 100 management companies or so that might be listed out there have between 3 and 10 stores. And, when you think about the total number of facilities, which is estimated somewhere around 70, 80,000 now, including third party management, equity firms, and REITs, it is such a small piece of that pie. And I think a good message to other entrepreneurs in the space, especially vendors that are bringing new products. Me and Mason talked about this skiing, a couple weeks ago. You want to target your product towards the small individual operators, which is very different than a lot of spaces where they're used to going after the big operators because of the pie difference. So you might grab a management company, one of the top 10 that has maybe 100 facilities. Well, then another operator comes by, they see a product that's going to be less expensive, or they do it in house or whatever. You lose a giant chunk. When you can build a portfolio of 200 separate individual owner operators, man, your liability and your risk of losing clients just is so low, and the longevity of your business is so much longer. So that's just a word of wise of all the products I've seen come into the space, and I've seen probably 1,000 come and go. If you are wanting to get into it and bring a product in, do something that's really going to target the one-offs. That's going to allow you to build a lot more successful business.
This is totally not where I was going, and I'm going to ask the question I was thinking about. But like, this is what happens when Brett starts talking. You named 70 to 80,000 facilities, and I think like a lot of probably outdated industry statistics say somewhere between 50 and 60. And so I'm curious why there's a gap. I mean, that's a pretty large gap. Like,
Yeah.
is that just clarity of data? Or those facilities were already there, we just didn't know about them? Or have we just been building at a clip? What's that gap around that?
Yeah, the biggest issue is a lot of industry stats, they find facilities that are listed online. With our Self Storage 101 company, we know when we're doing studies, there are a lot of small facilities that don't show up at all within Radius or any of these other products. Because let's say it's 50 units, 30 units. Well, in a lot of cases, those don't trigger at all. So by the time you add the smaller ones, all of those kind of also niche ones that might be a warehouse with an additional 30 units attached on the other side. By the time you add all of that up, that's why I put that estimate at 70 to 80,000. Very different, just because of the way it's counted. But I know that there are a lot of facilities that people don't recognize in the official statistics as facility.
I mean, again, another conversation that we had in Aspen Snowmass recently was just like how hard it is to get like accurate data around a specific area for operators. The question that I was going to ask and where I was leading with talking about the small long tail or the long tail of industry is like, how do these operators actually differentiate themselves when competing with REITs, right? And my assumption is that a lot of these, say 30 to 100 unit small operators are in tertiary markets, and so like location probably is like one area of competition. But like, what are other things that these operators can do to really compete with the REITs or the Coppers of the world? Even
Yeah, or even, yeah, I can kind of answer that twofold. How do we even compete with the REITs? Because obviously for us to them is thousands of store difference. But then for the individual operator, we'll kind of talk about that first. And really, I guess some of our differentiators or that we strive for are very similar. Just maybe where we market those is a little different. But a big piece is personal touch. I mean, at the end of the day, we all understand the REITs are the best at what they do. That's why they're the size that they are. They have the growth that they have, and they're worth the money that they're worth. I mean, most of the industry would not be here today without a lot of their operational achievements and advancements that they've made based on the scale. But a big thing is customer service and consistency, a knowledge of the specific store and the specific town and community basis. I think a lot of one-off owners, which is also why they like to, continue to run their own store, is for some people, they're part of the community and they're a staple in the community. I mean, I can't tell you how many I've been to where the owner was the deacon in church. He had a gas station for 20 years that his grandfather owned before that. And so now he has a storage facility also there and wants to talk to everybody that they come in. So you see some of that. But I think if you're a sophisticated operator and you're really trying to compete, the pricing strategies and promotions are a very easy way to differentiate, because all of the REITs, understandably so based on volume, the way that they price is drastically different. Most of them are extremely aggressive. They're doing very high rate increases extremely quickly. And they have a monster of a revenue management system, all internal for each of those companies that they've built to some degree, that can change prices and understands in a fluctuation of a millisecond difference of, oh, this customer is willing to pay another $2.30. We understand based on their profile. And it makes so many of these changes, and they've spent so much, billions on it, that for individual operators, you don't have to be that aggressive. There's really, you might not even have the ability, but you can charge a little less. You don't have near the expenses that those companies do. Typically, you might even be able to give some better promotions or some better community involvement, whatever that might be. But pricing is the number one way, because you're not going to beat them on marketing. You're not going to beat them on call center. Maybe customer service of the call center is where you can beat them. Like, obviously, that's our big thing, and other operators that are our peers, they do the same thing, where the big guys, given on size and scale, it's really hard to provide consistent, good customer service. Whereas for, medium-sized or smaller operators, it's much easier to provide that good service. I think those are probably the biggest ways, is pricing, not being near as aggressive with rate increases and all of those pieces, as well as having a little bit better one-to-one customer service.
For the folks like listening to, sorry, Mason, it's just I'm curious, like on the even third-party management side of things and all that, what are, on the flip side, what are the things that are the owners that may be starting to work with you guys, et cetera, think they're getting from third-party management, but almost never actually do? They don't understand.
Before you answer that, I want to just really quickly wrap up. I think what I heard, Brett, is consistency, authenticity, and then maybe personalization on a localization level, right? Those are kind of some key characteristics, and it's interesting just to kind of think about that through that. So anyway, sorry.
I'm going to have you just follow me around and summarize everything I say into a couple words, because that was perfect. Consistency and authenticity, you had me. I was like, wow, that's really good.
Brett, I've got my own. Rodolfo said it for a really long time. The robot brain has been installed for a very long time up here.
Sure.
Put it on a banner.
Yeah, there you go. Honestly, that might need to be a new marketing ploy. It's great. Love that. So, Rodolfo, remind me again, I got off on that tangent with him. So what was the question again?
So I would just simply what are storage owners or operators that you work with, right, that are trying to get into third-party management with copper, for example? What do they, for the most part, think they're getting that, but they actually don't get with third-party management? I just want to break that down for folks that are listening, so they understand all that aspect that goes into it.
Biggest one that we see all the time is they think that they're going to hire third-party management and have full control of their business and all the decisions made by the third-party management company. Now, there is a degree to which every third-party management company gives say-so or control over aspects of the business. Like the REITs, why in the world would they give up any control when they have these documented processes and they're doing it for 3,000 facilities? Well, you better do it the exact same way for everything, so you can't really allow any personalization. And so I understand that. Some management companies allow maybe a little bit too much control, and then you end up, it works at 20 facilities where, all right, we're going to have 20, but we make all these exceptions for all 20. That does not work at 100 stores. You all of a sudden very quickly have bad customer service, people are dropping the ball, et cetera. So the big hurdle we try to get them to understand is there are things that we allow you to have input on. And that, in our case, that, a good example would be pricing. We're going to make our recommendation for revenue management, rate increases, and all of that. But at the end of the day, financially, it's your facility. You might come to us and say, yeah, I don't want to be that aggressive, or yeah, I really don't want to give that promotion. Well, in our case, we allow you to do that, but we're going to make a hell of a caveat. We're going to make a hell of an argument to say why you should or shouldn't do that. And we're going to put it in writing and make sure you confirm that, yes, I want to do this, so that when it doesn't work, we come back and we say, this is why we told you not to. But we do allow some say so. But then there are a million things that we cannot allow the owner to have input on. Auctions are a great example. And all management companies operate this way. You're not going to be able to come in and dictate when we sell units, how we sell units, what the late fees are, because there's a lot of legal ramifications. We can't go changing and making exceptions, because then people make mistakes on auction schedule or following state laws and timelines. That's a really easy way to get them in trouble and the management company in trouble. So I think the biggest hurdle that we get all the time is people not understanding clearly what they have a say on and what they don't. So in our case, we make a very, very upfront, during the sales pitch, we explain exactly what our role is, what you can put input on, what you can't put input on, to get that clarity. But I think a lot of people get that confused. And the second piece, I would say, are big construction projects. There are some exceptions with some of the biggest operators where they might help with re-roofing an entire facility, and they might have a big maintenance division that does that. But for most storage management companies, we'll consult with you, we'll give you vendors. But if it's a big construction project, we want the owner to handle it, just because a lot of liability in, building a new building or having a roof, that isn't done right. And then those types of projects, as an owner, I would expect, that you want them to understand that you're going to be handling stuff like that. Small maintenance, pretty much every management company deals with. If we're replacing doors, hasp, cameras, gates, whatever it is, in almost every case, most of the management companies will handle that.
That's awesome. Yeah, obviously being upfront and being explaining all the details probably helps with that sales pitch. So, and there's a lot of other third-party management companies out there. So, just interesting to see that whole landscape was coming in, trying to do the same or whatnot. So either way, Mason, are you ready for our favorite part of the show?
I love the rapid fire, quick fire questions, and I could sit here and pick Brett's brain for literally the next 2 weeks and stuff like that.
Look,
but
you guys bring me on as much as you want. I enjoy I have to do something for work. So whatever, whatever it is, you guys invite me on, I'll do it.
That's awesome. You want to kick it off, Rodolfo, or you want me to kick it off?
Yeah. I'll ask you a few, and then I'll pass it on. Easy. First tool that you open on a Monday morning.
Outlook always is going to be my very first thing. And then the calendar specifically, first thing that gets opened every Monday.
Okay. How do you keep yourself learning? Do you do something you read, watch, or
I do a lot of educational podcasts, a lot of history podcasts. I love expert podcasts where some random, it could be about anything. It'd be like somebody that worked on, a spaceship comes on. I think that's fascinating. I play a ton of video games, which is very good for your brain health.
I know this.
You can read the studies. It's fantastic for your brain.
What console?
I literally, if you see the setup, I anything from PC, Switch, Xbox, PlayStation, I have it all.
It sounds like he was trying to win an argument there, just to be fair.
Look, if I had to pick, PlayStation is my favorite of all time.
Nice. I was about to say, I grew up with PlayStation and Sony, so I've always stuck with it. Last one. What brand do you admire outside of storage?
Yeah. So outside of storage, okay. I was going to say, I'll give a quick storage answer, which is I have a ton of respect and love, obviously, aside from you guys, for 10 Federal. I think they are unbelievably smart. They are doing incredible things, great advancements. I have a ton of respect for them, love them as a peer and good friends with them. Outside of storage, that's a really, really hard one. Actually, you know what? I'll give a kind of niche one. Greatest video game company in the world is FromSoft. It's a Japanese company. They made the greatest video games of all time. Dark Souls series, Sekiro, Elden Ring, Bloodborne. I mean, they are the absolute kings at all things that they've never made a bad game. And I actually wrote a letter I invited their company to my wedding just to see if they would respond. So if I could get, the head there too, they
That
obviously didn't
is
respond, but that would have been really
wild.
cool. Maybe I should have written in Japanese. I don't know. But
That is
huge
wild.
love for them.
All right, so hold on. Sorry, I was going to pass it along to you, Mason, but you did bring it up. I was wondering, you're an Elden Ring or Bloodborne type fan, so you played it all, and okay, all right.
Obsessed. I think I have 1,200 hours in Elden Ring. I think I've got
Damn.
probably 400 in Bloodborne. I mean, those are my comfort games. Like,
Yeah.
so usually once a year, I'll replay kind of all their games at some point.
See, that
Amazing.
game is so massive. It's intimidating how much you can do. They give you too
Mhm.
much freedom, I feel like.
Oh yeah.
It's beautiful. It's just like it's definitely intimidating.
You can't start there. Okay. For anybody listening, wants the games, one, I'll tell you, these games will change your life for the rest of your life. You will literally look at every other game and be like, why is this not on the same standard as these? But you can't start with Elden Ring. It's too much going on. At least some people did, but I think that's hard. You start with either Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne. Either of those games, and do not feel bad about looking up guys, asking questions. They're very ambiguous, and there's nothing wrong with looking it up to help you get a better understanding. But it will change your life if you play that.
I love that. I'm gonna have to. I'm completely lost on that side of the world, so I'm gonna have to
I
look
will
it up a little
say,
bit.
just as another like caveat there, I have whenever I played it, I pull up ChatGPT,
Mhm.
and it is the perfect like assistant to help guide.
Oh,
It's
that's
throughout that
incredible.
game.
awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
It knows, like, if you barely describe what you're doing in the game, it knows exactly where you are and will immediately populate pictures, give you explicit directions. It's great.
That's super cool. Level of gamers that I've got my Switch to,
Nice.
I like it. It's the casual stuff is good. Awesome. With all the music artists behind you on the wall, I'm curious, what's the first concert you ever went to?
Wow, first concert. That's really tough. I'll say the first memorable, concert that I went to would have been, it was either EDC or Okeechobee. I'm a big festival goer, and I can't remember which of those. I think it was Okeechobee was my first ever music festival, and it was the greatest lineup of all time of any one of them. Look up the first year when you get a second of Okeechobee, but it was like Kendrick Lamar, Mac Miller, Bass Nectar, Skrillex, Sfongle, which is a crazy jam band. It was like anyone you could imagine was there. I think it was so crazy that Post Malone was like at like 5 p.m. on one of the days, and he was, young and coming up. And so that would be, I think, my favorite one of all time, since I can't remember maybe the first one.
Knowing your dad a little bit, I'm sure you were basically out of the womb at a concert at some point in time. So
Only difference is he's a big Jimmy Buffett and
yeah,
beach bum music, and so
totally.
that's his room.
Cool. Kind of going to a little bit more local for you. I know we got to talk about Nashville a little bit. Are we on the Nashville hot chicken train or no?
Listen, another life-changing piece of advice for this. Do not get Hattie B's. If you want something that more people know about, Prince's is much better. But if you want the absolute best hot chicken, and that is undeniable fact, it's called Red's 615. I am telling you right now, it's over by close to Vandy. It's a little shack. Attached to it is the oldest bar in Nashville, side by side. Sure, it takes 45 minutes to get your food. It is the best hot chicken, to the point where most weeks I order it every week, at least one of the days on the weekend.
That is a huge advertisement there for hot chicken. That's awesome. Favorite locals venue in Nashville?
Man, I would say probably the Basement East has really good shows. If you wanted to go to kind of the coolest bar scene in East Nashville, I would say, what's it called? Maybe Rosewood. I think it's Rosewood. I don't know why that just blanked on that, but it's over in East Nashville, and it is really, really cool. Even as someone that doesn't drink, that place rocks. It's really, really cool.
Nice. And it's a timely one. This episode won't go out prior to the game on the weekend, but are we interested in the Super Bowl, the game, the halftime show, any of it?
I am a huge football fan, both NFL and college. I think this is the most boring Super Bowl matchup I can remember in a long time. No one cares about the Patriots right now, other than Boston, and I can't get that excited for it. Bad Bunny's probably going to be good, by the way. I don't listen to him. He does make really, really good music. A lot of my friends like him, and certainly he's got some songs that I know. But I think he'll still kill it. Even though I might not be into his music, he's going to probably do a great job.
I just went. I'm Puerto Rican, so he's Puerto Rican, right? Big fan. I was able to check off going to his concert in Colombia earlier this year, and so that was awesome to be able to, uh, be able to be there, attend, and I think this album was one of his best. Obviously, has gotten a lot of recognition. Hopefully, more people. I think a lot of people like it. So, I'm excited
Big
for that
shout
too.
out to him for doing that residency in Puerto Rico, giving
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that money back, bringing tourism. He added, they said the stat the other day, but it was like millions and
yeah.
millions of dollars to their economy for doing that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Brett, man, it's always a pleasure, dude. I appreciate you so much as a friend, as a partner that we get to work with. So, thanks for spending the time coming on and chatting with Rodolfo and I.
One last question, just so everyone knows, where can people find you, or where do you want to direct people?
Sure. Yeah, of course. So, one, you can just email me directly if you want, or you can go to our website. The website is copperstoragemanagement.com. And then my email is Brett, BRETT, dot copper, not Cooper, at copper, S is in Sam, M is in management.com. So Brett.copper at copper SM. Please reach out. Even if you don't want to work with us and you just have questions about remote or any operations in general, I'm always happy to give some time to help you out, regardless of what you're going to use.
Awesome, Brett. Again, thanks so much. And I'll see you at the next show.